So I'm going to practice a little of the Nürburgring in the VLM configuration with the Lotus 49. Pretty much the hardest car in iRacing to drive. So anyway, iRacing recently converted both the Mazda MX-5 and the Ford spec to sequential. Two cars, pretty much the only two cars that were H-pattern that I drove. And they switched them both to sequential. And I was really disappointed that they did that. If they had left the old cars in the game, just to give you the option to drive it, I probably wouldn't be as offended by it. And as disappointed. Because I really didn't race the MX-5 that much anyway. I did race the Ford spec quite a bit. But I really don't think I'll ever drive either of those cars again. In the same update, though, they did update this car to make it a little more forgiving, to give the tires a little more forgiveness on the limit, and it is much better. But the feeling of disappointment I got from driving the new MX-5 and the Ford spec in sequential and really hating it, and then going to this, was like the exact opposite feeling. I was so happy to drive this car. I've always had it since it first came out, but when this car first came out, it was impossible to drive. Like right now, it's not impossible to drive anymore. It's next to impossible for me to get around this track without dying. I've been at this for an hour already. Usually get through my outlap, get to the finish line, and then when my actual timed lap starts, that's usually when I bit it somewhere into a wall, when I'm actually trying to go fast. So it's still next to impossible to drive, it's just not actually impossible anymore. But it is a lot of fun, and I just remember, you know, after I tested out the new sequential in the Ford spec and the MX-5 and just feeling kind of down about it, you know, these cars aren't really going to exist in H-pattern anymore, we're not going to be able to drive in that style of driving. Driving this put a smile on my face, it had me laughing, and it's just really satisfying. Unfortunately, it's not really very popular, so it's really tough to actually get a race in. And what I was trying to say is, when this car came out, it was impossible to drive for most people, and everybody just sort of pussied out on it and quit on it because it was just way too hard to drive. In its current form, though, it's not too bad, because, you know, how hard you push is really kind of optional. If you go easy, you'd be just fine. And I've noticed where the car would usually kill you is when you get over between 7,500 and 8,000 RPM to 10, where the rev limit got really high and you were still accelerating. The car would just kill you, basically. And now you can still feel that the car is trying to break loose when it gets to maximum RPM, but usually it doesn't. It's a little more forgiving, and you're able to keep it straight. So I'm just going to do a test here of full acceleration up to 5th gear, and I'll just show you what I'm talking about. So right when you get over 8,000 RPM, I guess, right there is where it starts to get a little sketchy, and even in 5th gear. And it's quite stable. Like, look at this. You know, it's not too bad. And hopefully I can start an actual timed lap now. Avoid the grass. I'm not sure if my gear ratio is correct. It feels like the gearing is a little high for the tight corners. I'm using a lot of second gear, where it seems like I should be in 3rd. But here we go. Brake really early, real early. Walking down the gears, because I don't really know the timing of that corner. Most cars I'd be in 2nd gear here, so I'm not quite sure if this is correct. Try second through here. Probably didn't need third yet. All I really want to do here is set a time that I can improve upon. And I've gone over that jump a whole bunch of different times with the nose pointing down, with the nose pointing up, and I've landed it pretty much every time unless I just went crazy, you know, just floored it. But I've landed the jump a whole bunch of different ways, and with the previous iterations of the car, the landings were terrible. The car would just go nuts. At least for me. There's that 7,000 RPM sketchiness. Oh, missed the gear. I don't need it anyway. Fourth is a little ambitious. We can keep it in third here. Don't quite need fifth here. At least not this gear ratio. The gear setup. Grass. The brake's so far back. Oh, don't pre-select your gears, don't cheat. Ooh. Herb. I have no idea what a good time on this track with this car would be, but I just want to set a time, so... Uh-oh, uh-oh. Thought I was gonna... The tires are feeling good now. Okay, so I was just able to do a time of 8:30:69, which is probably complete garbage, but whatever. At least I was able to do a clean lap. But I mean, hey, if a complete moron like me, a scrub basically at this game, can do it, you probably can too. But yeah, just give this car another shot because it's massively improved from what it was. The only thing you need to know is that the braking distance is so long. You're just sitting on the brakes forever waiting for the car to slow down. And it's probably the slowest shifter in the game. So, and what I mean by that is you have to rev the engine to climb up all those RPMs to rev match. It just takes quite a while. Whereas if you drive something like the Lotus 79, the rev, when you're in neutral, so let's say, the revs just pop right up. Like instantly, versus this, you're trying to rev match and you're just waiting for the needle to climb up so you can put it into the right gear. Because if you don't do that, if you don't rev match, obviously, drop it to the gear too quickly, the car's probably going to spin if you're in a corner already. So yeah, there's only two real things you need to know. The transmission is slow. I mean, you could just, you know, turn on some of the aids to make it, which is probably what 99% of people do anyway. If you want to drive it correctly, yeah, it's a slow transmission. And you just got to sit on the brake for a long time. If you do that, it's really not that hard to drive. I've been able to get around most tracks without too much drama. And on cold tires, it understeers a lot. It doesn't oversteer as badly as you'd think. I mean, if you just slam the gas pedal out of a corner, yeah, it's going to spin. But yeah, it's pretty forgiving compared to what it was when this car first came out, which was probably like 9 years ago or something like that. It was just a disaster. Everything, you know, there's this stigma in iRacing that the cars are impossible to drive on the limit. Well, this car probably was when it first came out. But over time, the cars have gotten more forgiving in general. I'm just thinking of what iRacing could do better to increase participation with a car like this that, you know, people might have the desire to drive it, but then they'll go into practice, they'll just be in there for 15 minutes and be like, nope, still not ready. Still not ready. I think what they could do is instead of having, you know, these races every 2 or 3 or whatever, 4 hours or whatever they are, that nobody shows up for, is just make 15-minute races around the clock. You know, if that doesn't work, they could do something like double XP, where if you drive this car, which is clearly the hardest car in iRacing to drive, why not give people a higher bump in iRating for driving it? Because clearly driving this car, especially racing it, is way more difficult than driving cars that, stay in their lane and are, they don't have much drama to them. You got to do it either way. You got to either add more value for the races you're doing. So if you compete in a race that actually happens to go live and have, go official, have enough people to make an official race, assign more bonus to that race, more safety rating or whatever, more I rating if you happen to be in the top 10 or whatever. Give it more value, or do the opposite. Make it a series that has, make it just a fun series. Anything to just get people driving it. Because if I was a person that drove this car, did, there's basically only, from what I've heard, 2 races a week where you can race this car out of the entire week. I'm never going to be able to make it into those 2 races. I just don't have time to plan my whatever day around them and be there at that time. But if there's races going around the clock, they're only 50 minutes long or whatever, I can jump in any time. If it's a fun series, if I was somebody that was, racing this car regularly, by regular, I mean 2 times a week, I'd rather be able to race whenever I want. I'd rather be able to jump in it as a fun series. Just a thought. But yeah, like every other game I play, I was playing Splitgate, Call of Duty. There's this double XP. I know it's stupid, but it gives people a reason to play one particular game style over another. Maybe assign some benefit to racing the cars that are more difficult. Give them, just do something. Something to boost the participation. I don't know, just a thought.